What if the very thing you thought was helping you, your constant awareness, your analysis, your vigilance, is the very thing keeping you stuck? Think about it. You lie in bed at night, replaying the day's conversations, worrying about tomorrow's problems, observing every flaw and every misstep. You watch your life like it's a movie you can't control, hoping that if you just watch it closely enough, the plot will somehow change. But it never does. That feeling of being trapped in the audience of your own life, that exhaustion from constantly watching and waiting for things to get better, that isn't a personal failure. That's a trap. It's called the observer trap. And for your entire life, you've been trained to live inside of it. But right now, as you hear these words, something is shifting. You can feel it, can't you? A subtle recognition that there has to be a different way. If this is resonating with you, I want you to type "I see the trap" in the comments right now. Let's acknowledge this together. The observer trap. For most of your life, you've been trained to be an observer. Watch the news, observe trends, notice what others are doing, react to circumstances, respond to conditions. This training is so complete, so thorough, so embedded in every aspect of modern life, that you probably don't even realize you're doing it. You observe your bank account and feel anxiety or relief. You observe your relationships and feel satisfied or disappointed. You observe your body and feel attractive or inadequate. You observe opportunities and feel hopeful or discouraged. In every case, you're watching something that appears to exist independently of you, something that you have to accept, manage, or cope with. But here's what they don't tell you in psychology classes, self-help books, or spiritual teachings. The act of pure observation, without conscious creation, is what keeps you locked in repetitive patterns. Every time you observe without creating, you're actually reinforcing the very reality you're observing. This isn't mystical thinking. This is how consciousness interfaces with reality. At the most fundamental level, when you observe your life from a detached position, you're unconsciously selecting that same reality template from the field of infinite possibilities. You're essentially telling the universe, yes, this is what I want to experience. Again, think about your morning routine. You wake up, and within seconds, your consciousness begins scanning your reality. You check your phone, you assess how you feel, you think about what you have to do today, you recall yesterday's problems. In those first few moments, you're not creating anything new, you're observing what already exists, and unconsciously agreeing to continue it. This is why change feels so difficult. You're not actually trying to create something new. You're trying to observe yourself into a different reality, which is like trying to watch a movie so intensely that it changes its plot. No amount of observation will alter what's already been created. This is the moment of choice. If you're ready to stop being a passenger in your own life, type "I choose to create" in the comments. This is your first act of conscious creation. Most people spend their entire lives perfecting their observation skills. They become excellent at noticing what's wrong, identifying patterns, analyzing problems, understanding their limitations. They develop sophisticated psychological frameworks for understanding why they are the way they are. They can explain in detail how their childhood shaped them, how their circumstances limit them, how their genetics predispose them to certain outcomes. And all of this observation, this analysis, this understanding keeps them perfectly locked in place. The science of consciousness creation. In quantum physics, there's a principle that most people misunderstand completely: the observer effect. Popular interpretations suggest that observation creates reality, but that's not quite accurate. What actually happens is more nuanced and far more powerful. Particles exist in a state called superposition, where they hold multiple possibilities simultaneously. They're not in one place or another. They're in a probability cloud of potential locations. The moment observation occurs, this cloud of possibilities collapses into one specific reality. But here's the critical part that changes everything. The type of observation determines which possibility becomes real. Dr. Dean Radin, at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, conducted experiments showing that focused intention, not passive observation, influences quantum systems in measurable ways. When participants merely watched random number generators, nothing changed. But when they held a clear intention while observing, the random outputs began showing statistical patterns that shouldn't exist according to probability theory. The difference between passive observation and creative intention is the difference between watching your life unfold and actively generating it. Your consciousness right now is like a quantum system. You exist in a superposition of infinite possible versions of yourself. Every moment offers countless potential timelines, outcomes, and experiences. But most people collapse into the same possibility over and over again because they observe from habit rather than create from intention. Right now, I want you to claim your power. In the comments, type "I am the creator of my reality." Speak it into existence. Neuroscience reveals something equally profound. Your brain cannot distinguish between actual experiences and vividly imagined ones. Dr. Alvaro Pascual Leon's research at Harvard showed that people who mentally practiced piano exercises developed the same brain changes as those who physically practiced. The neurons fired in identical patterns, whether the experience was real or imagined. This means your brain is constantly being shaped by whatever you focus your attention on, whether that's observation of current reality or creation of intended reality. Every time you observe your limitations, your brain strengthens neural pathways that make those limitations more real. Every time you create from possibility, you build new pathways that make those possibilities accessible. The question isn't whether you're creating your reality. You already are. The question is whether you're creating consciously or unconsciously, deliberately or by default, as an active creator or as a passive observer who keeps recreating the same patterns. The shift from observer to creator, I remember it clearly. It was about a year ago, sitting in my grandmother's old room. The air was still and smelled faintly of old books, and the lavender she always loved. My life in that moment felt like a record stuck on a skip. Same heartaches, just different faces. Same financial worries, just different excuses. Same feeling of being stuck, no matter how much I tried to push forward. I had spent years being a detective in my own life, observing these patterns. I analyzed them in therapy, journaled about them endlessly, talked about my childhood, my triggers, my story. I was an expert observer of my own pain, and that expertise, that constant watching, was the very thing keeping me trapped. The breakthrough came not with a bang, but with a quiet collapse. I was sitting on the edge of her bed, looking at a photo of her from years ago, feeling that familiar, heavy wave of disappointment. But this time, not just in my circumstances, but in myself. And something inside me just stopped. It wasn't giving up. It was more like a machine I didn't even know was running, suddenly clicked off. In that quiet, sunlit room, I noticed something I'd never seen before. I was watching my life happen to me. I was observing my emotions, my thoughts, my problems, as if they were a movie I was forced to watch. I was the audience member in my grandmother's old armchair, complaining about the same plot twists, year after year, never realizing I could simply get up and walk out. That's when I asked myself the question that changed everything. What if I stopped observing what is, and started creating what could be? If you're ready to make that same shift, I want you to type "I am shifting now" in the comments. Let the universe know you're done watching. Not positive thinking, not visualization, something deeper. What if I stopped relating to my life as something that happens to me, and started relating to it as something that happens through me? I didn't try to change my circumstances right then. I didn't make a vision board. Instead, I did something that felt almost rebellious in its simplicity. I stopped checking. I stopped observing whether things were getting better or worse. I stopped monitoring my progress like a stern teacher. I stopped assessing my situation. And in that space where all the observation used to be, I began creating, not creating as in forcing things to happen through sheer effort, creating as in holding a feeling, a frequency, of what I intended to experience, regardless of what my current reality was showing me, creating as in deciding to be the person who already had the peace and purpose I wanted, not the person desperately trying to get it. The shift was so subtle I almost missed it, but within days life began to move. Not because I was forcing it, but because I had finally changed my relationship with reality itself. A person I hadn't spoken to in years reached out with an unexpected opportunity. A project that had been blocked for months suddenly flowed with ease, but the most profound change was internal. The observer in me saw problems. The creator saw potential. The observer asked, "What is real?" The creator asked, "What wants to become real?" Through me. This is your moment to declare a new identity. If you are stepping into your power as a creator, type "I am the master of my life" in the comments right now. This distinction might seem philosophical, but it has immediate practical applications that will transform every area of your life. In relationships, observers notice what their partner does or doesn't do, and react accordingly. They observe communication patterns. They identify problems. They analyze dynamics. Creators generate the quality of connection they intend to experience, regardless of current patterns. They don't wait for the relationship to improve, so they can feel loving. They embody loving presence, and allow the relationship to reorganize around that frequency. In career and finances, observers monitor their bank account, track opportunities, assess market conditions, and make decisions based on current reality. Creators hold a clear intention for the value they provide and the abundance they experience, and they take inspired action from that frequency, rather than reactive action from scarcity. In health, observers monitor symptoms, track progress, and adjust behaviors based on how their body responds. Creators embody the vitality they intend to experience, and allow their body's intelligence to reorganize around that state. The difference is subtle, but produces radically different results. Observers are always one step behind reality, responding to what already is. Creators are one step ahead of reality, generating what wants to become. The recognition that changes everything. Right now, something is activating in your consciousness. You can feel it, can't you? Not a thought or an emotion, but something deeper. A recognition that you've been operating as an observer far more than you realized. A sense that there's a completely different way to interface with reality, that you've glimpsed but never fully embodied. If you can feel this awakening inside you, type "My shift is here" in the comments. Claim this new reality. This recognition is the beginning of the shift, but recognition alone isn't enough. The observer state is deeply habitual. You've been trained in it for decades, through education systems that taught you to memorize and repeat, rather than create and innovate, through media that trained you to consume and react rather than generate and initiate, through social conditioning that rewarded conformity and punished originality. Breaking free from the observer state requires more than understanding. It requires practice, repetition, and a willingness to feel uncomfortable as you learn to operate in a completely new way. Here's what you need to understand. You don't become a creator by learning new techniques or acquiring new information. You become a creator by recognizing that creation is your natural state and observation is the learned habit you need to unlearn. You've developed the ability to observe your own observation. You can watch your thoughts, notice your patterns, recognize your reactions. You've created some space between stimulus and response. This is a significant evolution from level 1. You're no longer completely identified with your reactions. You can see your conditioning. You understand that your thoughts aren't necessarily true, that your emotions are temporary, that your patterns were learned and can potentially be changed. But here's the trap. Most people think this is the destination. They become professional observers of their own consciousness. They can describe in elaborate detail how their mind works, what their triggers are, why they respond the way they do. They've developed sophisticated frameworks for understanding themselves, and they remain stuck in the same patterns, just with more awareness of why they're stuck. This is because observation, even self-observation, even metacognitive awareness, is still fundamentally the observer position. You're watching consciousness operate, but you're not yet consciously creating with it. Level 3. Creative consciousness. This is where everything transforms. At this level, you recognize that you're not the observer of consciousness, or even the consciousness being observed. You're the creative force that generates both the observer and the observed. This isn't a state you achieve through practice. It's a recognition that shifts your entire relationship with existence. You stop asking, "What is my life showing me?" and start asking, "What wants to be created through me?" At this level, you don't observe your reality and try to improve it. You generate new possibilities from a space that exists before observation occurs. You don't analyze your patterns and try to change them. You embody frequencies that make old patterns irrelevant. The shift to level 3 consciousness isn't gradual. Even though the recognition is sudden, you'll have moments of operating as a creator, generating new possibilities, feeling that flow state where life moves through you rather than happening to you. Then you'll slip back into observer mode, analyzing what happened, checking whether it's working, monitoring your progress. This is where we step into our power together. If you are committing to this new level of being, type "I operate as a creator" in the comments. This back and forth is natural. Don't make it mean anything about whether you're doing it right. Simply notice when you've slipped into observer mode and consciously shift back to creator mode. Every time you make that shift, it becomes easier, more natural, more automatic. Think of it like learning to ride a bicycle. At first you fall constantly. You can't maintain balance for more than a few seconds. But you don't conclude that bicycles are impossible, or that you're fundamentally incapable of riding. You keep practicing, keep adjusting, keep finding your balance, and eventually it becomes so natural that you don't even think about it. Imagine expenses appeared, or income didn't materialize as expected, or you're looking at your bank account feeling that familiar anxiety about money. The observer responds. You look at your bank account and observe the number. You feel anxiety because the number is lower than you want it to be. You start thinking about all the bills you need to pay, all the things you can't afford, all the ways your life would be easier if you had more money. You might create a budget, look for ways to cut expenses, start applying for new jobs or additional work. All of this is driven by observation of current reality and reaction to what you observe. There's nothing wrong with practical action, but when it's driven purely from observation of limitation, it reinforces the frequency of limitation you're operating from. I don't have enough, so I need to fix this problem. That frequency of not having is what generates more experiences of not having. The creator response. You notice the bank account number, but you don't identify with it as the truth about your financial reality. Instead, you ask, what wants to be created here? You tune into the frequency of abundance, not as something you lack, but as a natural state that wants to express through you. This doesn't mean ignoring practical reality or pretending money doesn't matter. It means consciously generating the frequency of abundance while taking whatever practical action feels aligned. You might still create a budget or look for new income streams, but the action comes from a completely different place. It's not desperate reaction to scarcity. It's inspired action from abundance consciousness. The difference is subtle in description, but dramatic in results. When you operate as an observer, you're constantly responding to current conditions, which means current conditions determine your state. When you operate as a creator, you're generating your state regardless of conditions, which means your state begins to determine what conditions manifest. This applies to every area of life. In relationships, you stop observing what your partner does or doesn't do, and start creating the quality of connection you intend to experience. In health, you stop monitoring symptoms as evidence of your body's limitations, and start embodying the vitality you intend to feel. The quality of your decisions changes. Observers make decisions through analysis and fear, trying to avoid loss. Creators make decisions through intuition and inspiration, moving toward what feels aligned. Your relationship with effort transforms. When you're operating as an observer, action feels like a grind, a constant determination to make something happen. When you're operating as a creator, you still take action, but it feels completely different. Instead of forcing and pushing, you're channeling and allowing. Instead of figuring everything out mentally, you're following intuitive hits that lead to perfect outcomes. Emotional stability improves. Observers experience emotional roller coasters because their state depends on external conditions. Something good happens, they feel good. Something challenging happens, they feel bad. Their emotional experience is constantly determined by observation of circumstances. Creators maintain emotional equilibrium because their state isn't dependent on what they observe. They can acknowledge challenging circumstances without being emotionally hijacked by them. They can experience disappointments without collapsing into despair. They can face uncertainty without anxiety. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions or bypassing difficult feelings. It means your core state remains stable, like the deep ocean, even when there are waves on the surface. When you shift from observer to creator, you're not just changing your personal reality, you're contributing to a collective shift that's occurring across the entire planet right now. We are shifting together. If you feel part of this collective awakening, type "We are awakening" in the comments. Millions of people are simultaneously recognizing that the observer position is a trap. They're discovering that they have far more creative capacity than they've been taught to believe. They're remembering that consciousness isn't something that happens in their head. It's the fundamental creative force that generates all experience. This isn't random, it's an evolutionary leap that happens periodically throughout human history. There are moments when collective consciousness reaches a threshold where new capacities become accessible. We're living in one of those moments right now. The shift from observer to creator isn't just personal development, it's species-wide transformation. And every person who makes this shift contributes to what researchers call morphic resonance, the phenomenon where patterns become easier to access once enough individuals have established them. This means your shift makes it easier for others to shift. Your embodiment of creator consciousness creates a template in the collective field that others can access more easily. You're not just transforming your own life, you're participating in the transformation of human consciousness itself. This is why you feel such urgency around these concepts. This is why this information found you at this exact moment. Your higher consciousness knows that now is when this shift is possible, necessary, and inevitable for those who are ready. The integration practice. I'm going to give you a simple practice that will anchor this shift from observer to creator into your daily experience. This isn't something you do once and forget. It's something you integrate into your way of being until it becomes automatic. Morning reset. The first few minutes after waking are crucial. This is when your consciousness either locks into observer mode for the day or establishes a creator frequency. Instead of grabbing your phone and observing the world, do this. Before you even get out of bed, place your hand on your heart. Take 3 slow, deep breaths. Ask yourself, what quality do I intend to create today? Examples: peace, abundance, creativity, connection. Don't try to make anything happen. Just feel that quality in your body for a few moments. Generate the feeling. Don't just think the word. Once you've integrated the basic shift from observer to creator, there's an even deeper level that becomes accessible. And this is where everything I've shared so far expands into something even more profound. At the deepest level, the distinction between observer and creator dissolves entirely. You recognize that consciousness doesn't observe reality or create reality. Consciousness is reality experiencing itself through infinite forms and perspectives. When you reach this level of understanding, you're no longer a creator trying to generate specific outcomes. You're the creative force itself expressing through the temporary form you call you. You're not creating your life from a position of separation. Your life is creation happening through the vehicle of your individual awareness. This isn't the goal you need to reach. It's the truth you recognize when you've released enough conditioning that your natural state becomes obvious. You don't become this. You remember that you've always been this and temporarily forgot. Your life as an observer is on one side of a threshold. It is safe, comfortable, familiar, known, and ultimately limiting. On the other side is creator consciousness, unknown, unpredictable, and infinitely more expansive than anything you've experienced so far. The threshold isn't something you cross through effort or force. It's something you cross through recognition. The moment you recognize that you're not the observer of your life, but the creative force generating the experience of life itself, the shift occurs automatically. That recognition might be happening right now as you read these words, or it might emerge over the coming days and weeks as these concepts settle into your consciousness and begin reorganizing how you interface with reality. Either way, the shift is inevitable. Once you've been exposed to this understanding, you can't unknow what you now know. You can't fully return to unconscious observation once you've glimpsed conscious creation. The question isn't whether you'll shift, but how consciously and deliberately you'll participate in the shift that's already occurring. The final step is yours. In the comments below, I want you to write just 3 words. I am creating, not I will create, or I want to create. Present tense, active voice. Because this isn't about becoming something you're not. It's about recognizing what you already are, beneath all the conditioning that taught you to observe rather than create. When you make this declaration, you're not just commenting on a video. You're making a commitment to your own consciousness, that you're ready to operate at a fundamentally different level. You're announcing to the field of infinite possibility that you recognize yourself not as an observer of life, but as a creator of life itself. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because everything shared here is designed to support your continued integration of creator consciousness. Each video builds on the previous ones, creating a progressive deepening of your capacity to operate as a conscious creator rather than an unconscious observer. The old you taught you to observe reality, understand it, and adapt to it. The new you recognizes that you're not adapting to reality. You're generating it through the quality of your consciousness, moment by moment. Welcome to creator consciousness. Welcome to the recognition that you've never been just an observer. You've always been the creative force itself, temporarily forgetting your true nature. The moment you stop being the observer, you become the creator. And that moment is now.